They told you to dream big, to visualize more, to chase the life you deserve, and you believed them. You believed that success would bring peace, that love would fix the ache in your chest, that money would silence the fear of being left behind. But here you are, exhausted, aching, still chasing. And the truth no one wants to say out loud? Desire is not always a sign of ambition. Sometimes, it's the deepest form of suffering. This video isn't about telling you to stop wanting things. It's about exposing the silent war behind your wants. Because you're not lazy. You're not broken. You're just stuck in a loop no one taught you how to escape. Let me ask you, what if the version of success you're working so hard for was never yours to begin with? What if the love you crave has nothing to do with romance and everything to do with the wounds no one saw? What if the life you think you want is just a mirage, a fantasy fed to keep you tired, obedient, and busy? We're about to talk about the 3 categories of desire that are quietly draining your joy, and how to finally break free. This isn't self-help fluff. It's a wake-up call, a philosophical punch in the gut, and a quiet reminder. You don't need to become more to finally deserve peace. Stay with me, because once you see through the illusion, you won't be able to go back. There's a quiet war happening inside millions of people, a battle between who they are and who they think they should be. It's not loud. It doesn't scream. It whispers. You're still not enough. That whisper follows people on their morning commute. It sits beside them at work. It watches them scroll through social media late at night. It's the voice that tells a single mother she should have already bought a house. That convinces a young man his life is worthless unless he becomes someone important. The desire to become more attractive, more successful, more enlightened might look like ambition, but it often hides self-loathing. Because when your worth depends on who you might become, who you are right now becomes unbearable. And that's not growth. That's suffering dressed in motivational quotes. We live in a culture that profits from your dissatisfaction. Billboards don't sell you a product. They sell you a new version of yourself. One where you're skinnier, happier, richer, calmer. One where you're finally enough. But let me ask you something. When was the last time you bought something and truly felt like your life changed? Not for a few hours or a weekend. I'm talking real change. Because if a new phone or a gym membership really made you whole, you wouldn't need the next thing. You wouldn't wake up with that same quiet ache, that subtle tension behind your ribs. This isn't just consumerism. This is psychological conditioning. A lifelong training to believe that your life, as it is unacceptable. Think about it. Kids are taught from a young age that they need to become something. Not just in career, but in identity. Be more disciplined. Be more confident. Be a leader. Be better. The problem isn't the desire to grow. It's the belief that you are worthless until you do. That belief follows us into adulthood, like unpaid debt. People clock into jobs they hate because they think they should be responsible. They avoid therapy because they should be stronger. They pretend to be fine because vulnerability should be hidden. And every should is a chain. You may not see it, but you can feel it. Every time you force yourself to smile when you're exhausted, that's the chain tightening. This is where the illusion starts to crack. Because real change, real evolution, doesn't come from hating who you are. It comes from knowing who you are. You don't need to become worthy. You were born that way. And no, that's not just a poetic idea. That's biology. That's psychology. A baby doesn't need to earn love. Why should you? But the system doesn't want you to believe that. Because if you did, you'd stop chasing. You'd stop spending. You'd stop performing. You'd reclaim something radical, your inner stillness. And in that stillness, the noise of the world loses power. Let me paint a picture for you. Imagine a factory worker in Detroit. He wakes up at 5 a.m., works 10 hours lifting boxes and taking orders, gets home to care for his aging mother, and still feels like he is falling behind because he hasn't started a side hustle. Or a nurse in Sydney who sacrifices her weekends to pick up extra shifts, only to scroll past influencers meditating on beaches. Do these people lack discipline? No, they're drowning in it. What they lack is rest, permission, compassion. Because somewhere along the line we were told that who we are, in exhaustion, in grief, in slowness, isn't good enough. So how do we break this cycle? First, by noticing it. Awareness is the first form of resistance. You can't heal what you won't name. Begin by watching your inner voice. Is it motivating you or punishing you? Then, start replacing "I should be" with "I already am." It sounds small, but it's revolutionary. When you wake up and feel behind, try saying, "I'm still worthy, even if today is slow." And if you fail, good. That means you're alive. That means you're learning. Your worth is not a goalpost. It's a constant. Stop trying to become perfect. Try becoming present. Let's get even more practical. Want to grow without destroying yourself in the process? Limit your exposure to content that reinforces inadequacy. Unfollow the accounts that sell you shame dressed as inspiration. Read books that nourish instead of punish. Try The Courage to Be Disliked or Self-Compassion by Kristin Neff. Set micro goals that align with your values, not trends. Rest without guilt, especially if your body is tired. Choose 1 hour a day to just exist without chasing. No podcasts, no self-help. Just you. A cup of tea, a park bench. A moment that says, "This is enough." Here's the hardest truth. Some people spend their entire lives trying to become someone they already were. They wear masks, play roles, and climb ladders, only to realize that the view from the top feels just as hollow. Because the issue was never the height. It was the disconnection. They abandoned their inner world in search of external applause. But applause fades. Identity based on others' approval will always be unstable. The only thing that lasts is this: coming home to yourself. Again, and again, and again. Not to change who you are, but to remember. And maybe that's where we begin. Not with goals, but with honesty. Not with ambition, but with acceptance. Imagine if the next time someone asked, "What do you want to become?" you said, "More me." No upgrades, no edits, just you. Breathing, being. And maybe that sounds too simple, too slow. But the truth is, what comes next might be the most radical kind of freedom, and it has nothing to do with who you should be, and everything to do with what you've forgotten you already are. There's a story we all grow up believing, that the more you have, the safer you'll feel. That ownership is a shield. That money is peace. That the right possessions will silence your anxiety, keep pain at bay, and give you a future you can finally trust. It's subtle. No one ever says it out loud. But it's there, in every insurance commercial, every job ad, every influencer showing you their productive morning routine with $200 planners and protein powders. It's a lie that wears a tailored suit. And yet, so many of us fall into this trap without even realizing. We confuse having with being in control. We stack up emergency funds, backup plans, wish list items, and we call it stability. But deep down, there's a fear pulsing beneath it all. What if none of this actually protects me? And that question is too terrifying to face. So we just keep buying. You see it in people who've never taken a day off, not because they love their jobs, but because they're afraid of slowing down. You see it in people who work 2 jobs and still feel like they're behind, not behind others, behind some invisible finish line that keeps moving. Because in a culture of endless consumption, enough doesn't exist. You get a raise, but expenses rise. You pay off your debt, but new temptations appear. You finally move out, only to be told that renting is failure and buying is the real goal. You climb one hill only to see 10 more. And here's the painful truth. When your self-worth is tethered to your net worth, you never feel at peace, only in pursuit. And pursuit, without pause, is exhaustion. Let me show you how this shows up in real life. A man in Toronto works long shifts as a delivery driver. He saves every penny to finally buy a secondhand car. For a moment, he feels powerful, like he's breaking through. But within months, that pride turns into pressure. Gas prices, maintenance, rising insurance rates. What felt like freedom becomes another stress. The car didn't change his life. It added weight to it. Or take a single mother in Birmingham. She buys her daughter a tablet so she won't feel less than at school. But then comes the pressure to update it, protect it, fix it when it crashes. Having more creates more things to manage. And the more we manage, the less we rest. This is how ownership becomes burden disguised as progress. And yet, society rewards this madness. You're praised for working overtime. You're applauded for grinding through burnout. You're called disciplined when you say no to leisure, but yes to debt. But where is the praise for enough? Where is the celebration for choosing peace over pressure? It doesn't exist, because contentment doesn't sell. If you felt truly secure inside yourself, half of the economy would collapse. Because marketing doesn't target your logic, it targets your longing. It feeds on your doubt. It whispers that peace is just one purchase away, and maybe you know deep down that it's not true, but the ache is still there. So you swipe the card, again and again, hoping the next thing will finally silence the hunger. But here's the paradox. The more we try to secure life through possessions, the more insecure we become. Why? Because every new item comes with a silent question. What if I lose it? And now, your mind is split. You don't just live, you manage. You maintain, you protect. A simple life is no longer simple. And the fear of loss becomes louder than the joy of gain. That's why minimalism isn't just about owning less. It's about needing less. It is a declaration. I will no longer measure my worth by how much I own, but by how free I feel. Not everyone needs to become a minimalist, but everyone deserves to live unburdened by the lie that more is always better. So how do we begin to shift? Start by identifying the things that whisper shame. The clothes you keep but never wear. The subscriptions you don't use but can't cancel because of maybe someday. The gadgets that promise to make you smarter, happier, faster. Ask, do these things serve me or do I serve them? Then take one small action. Donate one item. Say no to one unnecessary purchase. Try a no-spend weekend. Replace consumption with connection. A walk with a friend, a shared meal, a nap without guilt. These are not luxuries. These are lifelines. You don't need to run away to a cabin in the woods. You just need to reclaim the space between your needs and your fears. And let us not forget financial fear, that creeping anxiety that there's never quite enough. But most people don't need more money. They need a new relationship with it. You don't cure insecurity by earning more if your spending is still rooted in proving your value. Instead, get curious. Ask yourself, what emotion drives my spending? Boredom? Inadequacy? Pressure to keep up? And then start building real safety, not in numbers, but in habits. Learn the basics of emergency funds, debt elimination, and conscious spending. Read Your Money or Your Life. Budget not to control, but to choose. To say, this is what matters. This is what I release. Because freedom doesn't come from having everything. It comes from knowing what you no longer need. And maybe that is the question we should all be asking more often. What am I still holding on to? And why? not just physically, but emotionally. The more we attach our identity to what we own, the more fragile we become. Because life will change, markets will crash, jobs will end, items will break. If your peace depends on any of these, it's already compromised. So perhaps real power lies not in acquiring, but in surrendering, in knowing that what's essential can never be taken. And that's the kind of power we'll need when we begin to talk about something even more intimate, the need to be loved. There's a kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being alone. It comes from being with people who don't really see you, or worse, from needing them to see you so badly that you stop seeing yourself. That's what the desire to be loved turns into when it isn't grounded in self-worth. It becomes a hunger, and hunger doesn't ask questions. It devours. You tell yourself it's about connection, that it's normal to want affection, to crave companionship. And it is, until that craving starts to define you, until you start bending, shrinking, performing, all for a few crumbs of attention. And you call that love. But it's not. It's survival dressed in romance. You see, the world sells you a story, that your missing piece is out there, that one day, someone will come along and make you feel whole, that love will heal your past, validate your worth, fill the silence inside your chest. But that story is a setup. Because when you believe love is something you have to get, you start treating yourself like something not yet complete. You wait for a message. You wait for someone to choose you. You wait to be seen, as if your value is stored in someone else's eyes. And the danger in this is subtle. You don't just want love. You start needing it to exist. And that's how emotional dependency begins. Not as obsession, but as emptiness. I've seen it in men who act tough all day at work, but fall apart at night when their partner pulls away. In women who overgive, overplease, and over-apologize just to be kept around. And in young people, especially, who base their self-esteem on double taps and read receipts. It's not their fault. They've been taught that being wanted equals being worthy, so they chase it. Through looks, through sex, through achievement. But the more they chase, the more they abandon themselves. They date people who drain them. They stay in conversations that feel like silence. They say, "I love you," when what they really mean is, "Please Dawn to leave." And that's the kind of love that hurts. The one built on fear. You don't need to stop wanting love. You need to stop collapsing into it. Because love, real love, doesn't erase your pain. It walks with it. It doesn't complete you. It complements you. It doesn't fix your past. It accepts it. But that only happens when you stop demanding that someone else rescue you from the work only you can do. And that work begins with honesty. Ask yourself, do I want to be loved, or do I just want to feel safe? Because there's a difference. One is a connection. The other is a dependency. And most people are confusing the two. They don't want partnership. They want protection. And no one can be your shelter if you're not home within yourself. So how do you begin to build that home? Start with small promises. Keep them. Say no when you want to say no. Stop explaining yourself to people who haven't earned your truth. Unfollow the accounts that make you feel like you're behind in love. Spend 1 hour a day with yourself. No distractions, no fixing, just being. Read attached or set boundaries. Find peace. Not for answers, but for language, to name the patterns that have been naming you. And remember this, you are not unlovable because someone left. You are not broken because they didn't stay. Some people walk away because they can't handle your depth. That's not your flaw. That's their limit. Let's bring it to the ground level. Imagine a woman in Houston who grew up never hearing "I'm proud of you." She finds herself in relationships where she constantly seeks reassurance. Every argument feels like abandonment. Every silence feels like a threat. Her partner says, "I need space," and she hears, "You're too much." That's not about him. That's about her history, her unmet need to feel secure. And until she learns to validate herself, no amount of love will ever feel like enough. That's the paradox. The more you depend on love to save you, the more it fails you, not because love is weak, but because healing doesn't come from being chosen. It comes from choosing yourself. What would it look like if you stopped chasing love and started creating belonging? Not through others, but through the way you treat your own soul. Maybe it's through journaling, not to track progress, but to listen to what you usually silence. Maybe it's in therapy, or in cooking a meal for yourself like you matter. Maybe it has simply sitting with the discomfort of being alone and realizing you didn't die. That's the turning point. When solitude stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like peace. And from that place, you attract differently. You love differently. Because you're no longer searching for someone to fill the void. You're building something no one can take. And here's the irony. The moment you stop needing love to complete you, that's when the healthiest love tends to find you. Because you no longer approach it from fear. You approach it from fullness, from freedom, from clarity. And clarity is magnetic. You no longer settle for attention dressed as affection. You no longer beg for the bare minimum. You no longer fear being alone, because now you've met yourself. And maybe that's the only relationship you ever truly needed to fix. But before we go deeper into that inner bond, we need to talk about something most people don't realize they were addicted to: the pursuit itself. There's a kind of exhaustion that sleep can't fix. It lingers in the background of your best moments, whispering that you should be doing something else, something productive. You might be on vacation, sitting on the beach, or lying on the couch after a long day, and still, there's this restlessness inside you, this need to plan, to improve, to build. Most people think it's ambition, but it's not. It's addiction. Not to achievement itself, but to the chase. Because in a world that measures value by output, the act of pursuing becomes more important than the thing you're pursuing. You're not chasing success. You're running from stillness. And stillness, in a society wired for speed, feels unbearable. So we chase. More goals, more content, more versions of ourselves. But if you listen closely, you'll notice that the faster people run, the less they know why they started in the first place. This isn't just a mindset problem. It's a cultural disease. We've built entire identities on becoming fit, becoming rich, becoming spiritual, becoming better. We worship the future and abandon the present. And when the future becomes a finish line, we keep moving. We never arrive. A mechanic in Detroit who works 12-hour shifts isn't dreaming of becoming a billionaire. He just wants enough money to stop worrying. But he can't stop moving, because slowing down would mean facing everything he's ignored. A mother in Dublin who fills every day with errands, appointments, favors, and cleaning doesn't even know what she enjoys anymore. She just knows that sitting still makes her feel guilty. These aren't people with time management issues. These are people who were never given permission to rest. And now, they feel like they don't deserve it. They believe their worth must be constantly earned through motion. But the more you chase, the more you lose yourself in the chasing. You start confusing movement with meaning. You check tasks off lists like a machine, but nothing feels complete. You watch motivational videos at 1.5x speed while answering emails. You listen to podcasts about focus while folding laundry and scrolling your phone. Your brain becomes a battlefield of tabs, all open, none truly seen. And even your healing becomes part of the productivity loop. You meditate so you can work better. You journal to organize your mind like a filing cabinet. You take breaks so you can return stronger, but never to simply be. The addiction to progress hijacks even your peace. You no longer rest. You recover. You no longer live. You optimize. And in that cycle, the soul starts to shrink. Not because you lack drive, but because you've forgotten how to just exist without a finish line pulling you forward. Here's what most people miss. The chase is not neutral. It costs you something. Every time you run without reflecting, you trade presence for performance. You lose the ability to recognize your own needs. You stop asking why you're chasing, and only focus on how fast you can run. That's why so many people hit their goals and still feel empty. They built entire staircases to destinations they didn't even want. They chased approval from people they don't respect. They spent years climbing corporate ladders only to realize the view from the top is still gray, still quiet, still lonely. Because the problem was never the speed, it was the direction. And when desire becomes identity, you forget how to stop. Not because there's something to gain, but because you're afraid of who you are without the chase. And society? It feeds this fear. You're rewarded for being burned out, applauded for saying yes to everything, promoted for sacrificing your weekends. We live in a system that labels anxiety as ambition and calls dysfunction drive. People post about their 5 a.m. routines like they're moral victories, as if rest is weakness, as if balance is laziness. And the worst part? You believe it. You feel behind when you're still. You feel guilty when you're kind to yourself, because you've been trained to think that being calm means being lazy, that not chasing something must mean you've given up. But maybe the real giving up is spending your whole life sprinting and never asking where you're going. That's the cost of the chase. You lose the ability to listen to yourself. And once that's gone, even success feels hollow. So how do we break this pattern? First, by remembering that rest is not a reward. It's a right. Stillness is not a waste of time. It's where meaning begins. Practice sitting with yourself without trying to fix anything. Don't treat solitude as something to be survived, but as something to be respected. Create time every day where you're not improving, not producing, not consuming, just breathing. Take slow walks without your phone. Listen to the wind. Feel your heartbeat without rushing to interpret it. If you want something practical, start a presence practice. 10 minutes a day where you do nothing but be. No agenda, no hacks, just space. You'll feel the withdrawal, the itch to move, to scroll, to check. That's the addiction fighting for your attention. Let it pass. That's where the real work begins. And don't confuse peace with passivity. This isn't about quitting your dreams. It's about waking up to whether they're really yours. So many people are exhausted, not because they're doing too much, but because they're doing the wrong things. Chasing dreams handed to them by society, family, or fear. Ask yourself, would I still want this if no one was watching? If the answer is no, pause. Reroute. You're not a failure for changing direction. You're wise for noticing the detour. The chase only fulfills you when it's aligned with your truth. But to know what that truth is, you have to stop running long enough to hear it. And maybe, just maybe, that is the greatest fear of all. Hearing what your soul has been trying to say beneath the noise. That you don't need to prove yourself. That you're already enough. That the finish line you've been sprinting toward was always a mirage. But before we can talk about that mirage, that unreachable fantasy that keeps us running, we need to look it in the face, the final desire, the most seductive lie of all, the dream of the perfect life just out of reach. There's a dream that keeps people moving, not because they're free, but because they believe freedom is just one more step away, one more raise, one more achievement, one more healed trauma, one more version of themselves. It's the fantasy of the perfect life, tailored, tidy, successful, spiritually aligned, emotionally healed, financially abundant, physically attractive, and somehow, always just out of reach. You see glimpses of it in curated Instagram reels, in YouTube thumbnails promising transformation, in those perfectly lit apartments where someone is sipping tea in total peace. And something inside you whispers, "Why not me?" that whisper turns into striving. But the closer you get, the more the finish line moves. Because the perfect life isn't a destination, it's a marketing strategy. And the cost of believing in it is your peace, traded for a mirage that evaporates every time you stretch your hand toward it. This fantasy doesn't show up the same for everyone. For some, it's the belief that once they get the perfect job, life will make sense. For others, it's about finding the perfect partner, or building a home that finally feels safe, or achieving a body that will silence their inner critic. But here's the secret that few are willing to admit. Many of the people who seem to have it all still feel like something's missing. The man with the 6-figure salary and house in the suburbs still wakes up with dread. The woman with the toned body and large following still feels unseen in her own mirror. The couple with the curated life still argues in silence after the camera stops rolling. Because the real problem was never the external. It was the belief that something external could fix the internal. And that belief is exhausting entire generations. Let's bring it closer to reality. Imagine a janitor in New York who scrolls through his phone on the train ride home. He sees people younger than him making it online, traveling the world, preaching manifestation and passive income. He doesn't want luxury, he just wants to feel like he is not falling behind. But the more he watches, the more broken he feels. Not because his life is bad, but because it doesn't look like the life he was told he should want. That's the poison. You don't just envy. You start to disown your own story. You lose the ability to recognize joy in your real, raw, imperfect life, because now it feels like a placeholder. Something to tolerate until your real life begins. But what if it never does? What if this moment, your chipped dishes, your secondhand clothes, your cluttered apartment, was already it? The unreachable perfect life keeps you trapped in comparison. You measure your day against someone else's highlight reel. You treat growth like a competition. You don't rest, because someone else is out there, using every minute. You don't celebrate your tiny victories, because they don't look like someone else's success. And slowly, you begin to resent your own pace, your own path, your own progress. That's the real damage, not just the burnout, but the shame of being human in a world obsessed with perfection. You are told to love yourself, but only after you've improved everything. You are told to rest, but only after you've earned it. You are told to accept yourself, but only if it fits into the aesthetic of healed. It's self-development turned into self-rejection. And yet, this illusion persists because it's profitable. You're easier to sell to when you feel inadequate. You're easier to manipulate when you think peace comes with a price tag. So the machine keeps spinning. New skincare, new coaching, new programs, new trends, all built on the same lie. That your current self is just a stepping stone to a better one. Shinier, richer, calmer. But no one tells you that chasing this ideal might cost you your present life. You start ignoring the people who love you as you are. You miss the beauty of a quiet moment because you're too busy documenting it. You forget how to feel gratitude because the algorithm has trained you to crave what you don't have. And the saddest part, most people die still believing they were one step away from finally being okay. So what's the alternative? Radical presence, the courage to choose your real life over the imagined one, the discipline to stop editing your existence for approval, the strength to say, this is enough for today. It's not a rejection of growth, it's a return to alignment. You can still want more, but not from lack, from love, from expansion, from creativity, not from fear. That means waking up and tending to what you do have, your breath, your body, your people, your time. It means investing in your nervous system before your brand. It means learning to say, I don't need to be perfect to be whole. And that kind of mindset, it doesn't sell well, but it liberates. If you want something real, build a life that can survive offline. Create joy that doesn't need to be seen to be real. Form connections that exist beyond messages and likes. Build routines that feed your peace, not just your productivity. That kind of life isn't glamorous, but it's grounded. It doesn't always look good in pictures, but it feels like home. And it begins with a decision to stop chasing the unreachable and start returning to the undeniable. Your existence, your breath, your right to be here, imperfect, unedited, and enough. But before we tie this all together, we need to go back to the beginning, to the root of every desire, and ask, what are we really looking for? So now that you've seen it, the trap behind the desire to be, to have, and to be loved, what are you going to do with it? Will you keep running, even when you know the finish line isn't real? Will you keep chasing versions of yourself that were never yours to begin with? Or will you do the harder thing, the braver thing, and stop? Stop to feel what you've been avoiding. Stop to question what you've been taught. Stop to remember who you were before the world told you what to want. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people will keep scrolling, keep working, keep striving, until they burn out completely. But you're not most people. You made it to the end of this video. You heard the discomfort and stayed. So let me ask you directly, what are you willing to let go of to finally feel free? What desire are you ready to question, reframe, or release today? If this video cracked something open in you, if even one sentence made you pause, then don't let it end here. Leave a comment. Share your thoughts. Let's turn this into a real conversation. And if you want to keep exploring the deeper side of life, without the filters, the hype, or the noise, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. There's more coming. Not to sell you a dream, but to remind you of something you forgot. You were never broken, just buried.